And this is a hadith of Anas radiallahu anhu. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, Allah's Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said, إذا أراد الله بعبده الخير عجل له العقوبة في الدنيا وإذا أراد الله بعبده الشر أمسك عنه بذنبه حتى يوافي به يوم القيامة. He said that when Allah desires good, when Allah wants good for a servant, He hastens for him the punishment in this world. And when Allah wants evil, or He desires evil for his servant, then He withholds, He holds back from his sin, meaning from punishing from him for his sin, until He takes, unless He takes him to account for it, or unless He punishes him, until He punishes him on the day of judgment. And then also, وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, إن عظم الجزاء مع عظم البلاء وإن الله تعالى إذا أحب قوما ابتلاهم فمن رضي فله الرضا ومن سخط فله السخط. So he said, indeed, the greatness of the reward is with the greatness of the trial, the greatness of the tribulation. And indeed, Allah the Exalted, when He loves a people, He tests them, He puts them to trial. So whoever is pleased, meaning whoever is pleased with that trial, then he will have pleasure, meaning Allah's pleasure. And whoever is angry, whoever becomes angry, meaning angry at the fact that he got put to trial and is in tribulation, then he will have anger, meaning Allah will be angry with him. So regarding these two hadiths, Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, he says in his commentary, Al-umur كلها بيد الله عز وجل وبإرادته, that all of the affairs, they are in the hand of Allah, the Mighty and Majestic, and His wish. So everything, all of the affairs are in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لأن الله تعالى يقول عن نفسه فعال لما يريد ويقول إن الله يفعل ما يشاء. This is because Allah the Exalted, He said about Himself, the doer of whatever He wills. So Allah is the doer of whatever He wills. إن الله يفعل ما يشاء. Indeed, Allah does whatever He wills. In another ayah, فكل الأمور بيد الله. So therefore, all of the affairs, they are in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He goes on to say, والإنسان لا يخلو من خطأ ومعصية وتقصير في الواجب فإذا أراد الله بعبده الخير عجل له العقوبة في الدنيا إما بماله أو بأهله أو بنفسه أو بأحد ممن يتصل به. He says, when a man, he says, we know that man is not free of error and sin and deficiency in fulfilling the obligations, whatever is obligatory. So when Allah wants good for His servants, He hastens the punishment for him in the life of this world, meaning for those errors, for those deficiencies, for those sins. He hastens the punishment for him in the life of this world, and so that punishment afflicts him either in his wealth, in his mal, or in his family, or his himself, or with someone who has some sort of connection with him. And this is because these types of punishments which are brought forward to the life of this world, then they expiate the sins. لأن العقوبات تكفر السيئات. So punishments, when Allah punishes you, that punishment is an expiation for your past sins. So he says, فَإِذَا تَعَجَّلَتْ الْعُقُوبَةِ وَكَفَّرَ اللَّهُ بِهَا عَنِ الْعَبْدِ فَإِنَّهُ يُوَافِي اللَّهَ وَلَيْسَ عَلَيْهِ ذَنْبٌ. So when this punishment is hastened and Allah expiates the sins of the servant, then the sin has been paid for. Meaning that you have now given your due measure and you will not have any sin and you don't have any burden on your shoulders when you meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so طهرته المصائب والبلايا. So basically the afflictions and the calamities have purified him until even Allah Azza wa Jal at the point of death, even at the point of death, Allah Azza wa Jal might give a servant a severe or a difficult death, meaning in the throes of death when you die, there's some severity and difficulty that you experience right at the last moments of death. And that difficulty that Allah gives to you is because the servant maybe he has a sin or some sins which are left, which is not been cleansed of. So as a mercy from Allah, before he leaves the world, Allah puts him through that difficulty, even in the last moments of his life, in order that he leaves the world حتى يخرج من الدنيا نقيا من الذنوب وهذه النعمة لأن عذاب الدنيا أهون من عذاب الآخرة. So he says that Allah does this with the servant so that when he leaves the world, he does so completely purified of sin. And this is a ni'mah because the punishment of the world is much lighter than the punishment of the hereafter. However, the Shaykh says when Allah desires for a servant evil, he will give him respite and wastadrajahu, and maybe he will give him like a long rope and give him respite and shower him with favors and repel even harms from this person. And this person may be deceived into thinking that because all of these bounties and favors and he has no afflictions in his life, he's not put to trial and everything appears to be good and he's being showered with Allah's bounties and favors, then he begins to rejoice. And effectively he is, he's deceived. So then he ends up meeting his Lord eventually while he is drowned in sin. He's drowned in sin and with evils. So he is punished now in the hereafter. And we ask Allah for pardon. So he says, فَإِذَا رَأَيْتَ شَخْصًا يُبَارِزُ اللَّهَ بِالْإِسْيَانِ وَقَدْ وَقَاهُ اللَّهُ الْبَلَاءِ وَأَضَرَّ عَلَيْهِ النِّعَمِ فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ اللَّهَ إِنَّمَا أَرَادَ بِهِ شَرًّا لِأَنَّ اللَّهَ أَخَّرَ عَنْهُ الْعُقُوبَةَ حَتَّى يُوَافِيَ بِهَا يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. So when you see a person like this, he is very brazen and open with disobedience to Allah, and Allah has protected him from suffering any calamities and hardships in his life, in his wealth, in his person, in his family, in the affairs. And you see him being showered with bounties from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the bounties of wealth, the bounties of offspring, the bounties of security and all these other things. Then know that Allah wants evil for this individual. Allah wants evil for this individual. Because Allah delayed the punishment for his sins for the hereafter. And when the hereafter comes, then the hereafter is much more severe. Then the Shaykh goes on to say that in this hadith, it is said, إِنَّ عِظَمَ الْجَزَاءِ مَعَ عِظَمِ الْبَلَاءِ. That indeed the greatness of the reward is alongside the greatness of the tribulation. So every time the Shaykh says the tribulation is greater, then the reward is greater. And so the easy tribulation has a slight reward, and the severe tribulation has a great reward, because Allah Azza wa Jal, لأن الله عز وجل ذو فضل على الناس Allah is the one who has bounty. He's bountiful over the people. When He puts them to trial with severe trials, then He gives them a tremendous reward. And when the trial is easy and light, then the reward will also be easy and light. Then in the hadith, وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى إِذَا أَحَبَّ قَوْمًا ابْتَلَاهُمْ فَمَنْ رَضِيَ فَلَهُ الرِّضَى وَمَنْ سَخِطَ فَلَهُ السَّخَطُ. And indeed, Allah the Exalted, when He loves a people, He will put them to trial. And whoever is then pleased, then He will have pleasure upon him. And whoever becomes angry, then He will have anger upon him. So this also, the Shaykh says, this is also a glad tiding for وَهَذَا أَيْضًا وَهَذِهِ أَيْضًا بُشْرَى لِلْمُؤْمِنِ. This is glad tiding for the believer. When he's put to trial with a musibah, with a calamity, with an affliction, he should not think that Allah hates him, Allah detests him. He should not be thinking, why has Allah put me through this? Why am I going through this physical pain, or this illness, or this psychological struggle, or this mental struggle, or this anxiety or grief? No. If that believer knows that he is upright and he seeks the face of Allah, then these calamities and trials and tribulations, these are glad tidings. These are good tidings. So these calamities are taken as good tidings for the believer, because he understands what these calamities are and what their purpose is. It is Allah wanting good for him, and Allah wanting to make the hereafter easy for him. So he's put to trial. يَبْتَلِيهِ سُبْحَانَهُ بِالْمَسَائِبِ فَإِذَا رَضِيَ الْإِنسَانُ وَصَبَرْ وَاحْتَسَبْ فَلَهُ الرِّضَى وَإِنْ سَخِطَ فَلَهُ السُّخْطُ. So if the believer understands all of this, and he's pleased with it, he has patience, and he has ihtisab, meaning he's patient and he anticipates and expects reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he will have pleasure, meaning the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if he becomes angry at this, he starts complaining and does the opposite of patience, which is to be angry and to complain and to express that dislike and so on and so forth, then he will receive anger in return. وفي هذا حث على أن الإنسان يصبر على المصائب حتى يكتب له الرضا من الله عز وجل والله الموفق. So in these hadith, what are these hadith telling us? They are encouraging a person to be patient upon all of the calamities, so that Allah's pleasure can be written for him. So this is the end of those two hadiths. And so these two hadiths show us how a believer looks at trials and tribulations. All of these trials and tribulations have been written for that individual 50,000 years before Allah created the creation. So no one, you will not be able to escape any trial or tribulation that comes to you in your life. It was written for you. And it is from Allah's prior knowledge and from His wisdom that He decreed that for you, because He wants good for you. If you are an upright believer, seeking the face of Allah, repentant for his sins, and not persisting in evil and disobedience. This brings us to the next hadith, and this is a tremendous hadith. This hadith is from Anas also. وعن أنس رضي الله عنه قال كان ابن لأبي طلحة